Well, Syracuse is an elite basketball program, and this year, no surprise, ranked number 2 in the country. So we're aware that we have a great challenge, a great challenge in this matchup. But with that said, I think our team is eager and looking forward to Sunday's game.
Does that first game against Fordham, I guess, get a little bit of the jitters out of the way?
Yeah, I think any time you can play in a venue, and in this case our home court, Madison Square Garden, for the first time this season, there's the advantage of familiarity. But at the end of the day, it's going to be about how we execute for that 2-hour window or those 40 minutes on the court against Syracuse. It'll determine the outcome of the game. But I think we're glad that we were able to perform well against Fordham and to get a win at the Garden and continue to make what we call baby steps or incremental progress. And that's what we're really focused on at this time of the year, is preparation on a daily basis in practices and games for the conference, and then ultimately go through the conference to prepare for the postseason. And after the conference tournament, the idea is to be playing your best basketball come March in the NCAA tournament. So we have a long way to go, and we don't kid ourselves. We deal in reality, which is this is a team that's a work in progress. And yet there's some bright spots, and there's some things about this group that we're really enthused about. And I wouldn't trade any of our players. I like the pieces, and I think come February we could be a dangerous team.
So any bright spots, elaborate about the bright spots.
Dry spots?
The bright spots.
Oh yeah, bright spots. There's been some dry spots too. Let's see. The bright spots is, as I've mentioned before, the depth and the balance of this group. Size and strength, skill and quickness, both an inside and an outside attack offensively. And defensively along the baseline, I like our size and length, and the fact that we've got 4 or 5 bodies, 20, 25 fouls to use in the basket area. And we also can play smaller lineups and create a faster pace and cause some problems for opponents with our disruptive pressure. So I think as a coach, it's a luxury to have options to play different ways. We can play big, we can play small, we can play fast, we can play on the half court. We can attack the three-point line, which we've seen is becoming a strength of this team. If you look at our numbers, 3 of the last 4 games, we were torching the nets. And yet that stretches the defense, so we can pound it inside or have more gaps to dribble penetrate into. We do feed the post when you have those three-point shooters out there. Now they have more time and space to operate down low. And so there's a complementary aspect of having the pieces on the perimeter as well as in the lane or the basket area and the paint. So I think specific players, Max Hooper, his development in recent weeks, Orlando Sanchez against Fordham, demonstrated his versatility at both ends of the court. Jamal Branch has been providing a real steady hand off the bench in terms of guard play. Phil Green's 3 turnovers on the season is a rather remarkable statistic. In my career, it's unprecedented as a broadcaster or an assistant or head coach. I've never had a player with that many minutes who only has 3 turnovers after 8 games. So there are just so many interesting, kind of unique narratives, success stories that are unfolding, and yet collectively as a group, we also have a little momentum here. This will naturally be a big challenge, and we're preparing for this opportunity, but also understand for us it's about the big picture come March, which is the way I've always coached. It's about what happens in March. You know, November, December are for show, as Pete Newell used to say. March is for dough. And the longer I've coached, the more I understand how profound that statement is. November, December is for show. March is for dough. And that was back in the 1940s when he said that. But it still holds true.
Coach, one of the interesting
Yeah.
things that about your team,
Yeah.
if I may ask, is
Yeah.
the number of overseas players,
Yeah.
international players.
Yeah.
Could you just talk a little bit about either the benefits or the challenges?
Absolutely, yeah. Yeah, it's a mix of both. Patience in teaching, coaching, and parenting is a virtue, and you know, no different with this year's team, and in particular because you have such an array, such a diverse, you know, roster. When we look at where, you know, these kids have come from. So, you know, sometimes as simple as what's lost in translation becomes a challenge in practice, or coming out of a timeout, or in a game where you're barking out instructions. With these kids being under duress, under the bright lights, and the speed and pace of the game, there are times where, you know, there's times where, you know, the translation you know, of language becomes an issue. And then also, like any team, regardless of where the kids come from, you know, they all have a unique story and background, and so getting to know each player in a more intimate, you know, authentic way helps in their development and in serving our purposes as a basketball team as we try and move forward and have success. So, you know, the team is really emblematic of New York City itself. You know, I've said that before. It's like our team's a microcosm of this city, because you have people from around the globe and coast to coast in this country that have come to New York, in this case with the purpose of being a student athlete at St. John's and trying to do some special things as a basketball team. But I personally think it's a really unique and fantastic situation, because we have players that are learning from one another, who come from these, you know, diverse backgrounds, and they get to share their differences, which I think makes this experience, you know, richer, deeper, more meaningful than if we were a team made up of you know, student athletes that were all the same or had the same profile or background.
And just to follow up, when you
Yeah.
talk about that learning, are you talking about them as a basketball team, or even as individuals, as just kids
Yeah.
learning from other?
Yeah, I was thinking more in the broader context of, you know, the differences, and, you know, Marco Borgo from France, and, you know, coming from that part of Europe, and the perspective that he brings, and Orlando Sanchez, who's got a dual citizenship from the Dominican as well as Spain. His father's from Spain, mom is from the Dominican, and he's spent time in both those countries. So that's unique in and of itself. And Gift from Nigeria, Chris Opeka from Nigeria, and then you've got Felix from Africa. So it's very New York. It presents certain challenges in terms of, you know, the differences in the language and cultural diversity, but I think it's a beautiful thing, because at the end of it, the common thread that we share is basketball. And similar to great musicians, you know, if you can bring them together and they can learn how to jam, we can make, you they make great music. They make a symphony. And I think with basketball, it's more like jazz. It's probably a better parallel in terms of music. But that's the whole idea, is we want to, as this year goes along, by March, be able to play a high level of basketball, be able to jam together and make jazz.
Thank you, Coach.
Sure.
You think a win Sunday would mean for your program?
Pardon me?
What do you think a win on Sunday would mean for your program?
You know, it's funny, you guys know I'm not as apt as most to get too carried away with one outcome, whether that's a win or a loss, and I know it makes an awful copy for you guys. But I'm just not, I don't even play that, just because I've coached long enough to know it serves no purpose other than, it serves no purpose. We know it's an important game, as every game is. If we win that game but don't do well the following game, then, we wipe out the positive step that we took against Syracuse. If we lose that game but bounce back with a win the following game, that's what's going to be most important. And so at the end of it, it's really about staying in the moment, staying grounded in process, development. And I don't know any other way to teach or coach, but I know for our fans and for our team to be able to face Syracuse in the Garden, makes it a big game. So it is a big game. But I wouldn't be able to quantify or measure what it means for the program or what does it say about where we are, because at the end of it, got to get ready for San Francisco and then keep on moving down the line. And what I'm most concerned with is March, and the more wins we accumulate between now and March, the better. But really, it's our development. Are we incrementally getting better? And I think we'll have a special season if we stay focused in that way, on that path.
So your three guys all said they felt it was probably the biggest game they haven't played yet. Do you agree with that?
Well, it is, because it's the next game. I think, probably last year there were games, and their freshman, sophomore year, they had different games. Probably, Notre Dame last year at home, and actually Notre Dame, those consecutive years that they played Notre Dame. UCLA, when they came in here a couple years back, had a big game feel. The wins at Cincinnati, I think, were big. But because this is the present, I would agree that it's the most important game because it's the next game, and it's Syracuse, and it's in the Garden, and there's a lot of interest when these two teams meet because of all the local alumni that live in New York and all the natural reasons for that.
The Syracuse fan base travels really well, not just here, but all around the country. But do you feel that this is a game where St. John's fans at least can come out and maybe show that this is the Garden and this is their home court, at least in this game?
Yeah, I think, I think our fans are like most fans. I haven't been at a place like Purdue, haven't been at UCLA, now at St. John's. All three stops, share some common aspects or elements, and that is the fans, when you win and put a good brand of basketball on the floor, show up, and if you don't, then you're going to struggle in terms of attendance in this era more than ever, because people can stay at home, watch it in surround sound, have their man cave or their home theaters, or the high def channels, and so people have a lot of options. So there's those that don't want to fight traffic, they don't want to pay the extra dollars for the hot dogs and beers, and save some dough and just stay home, or fight the weather or whatever it happens to be on a given day. That wasn't the case in LA in terms of the weather, but there were, unless we were playing Duke or Kansas or USC, our rival school, an occasional other non-conference matchup, we were going to always have paltry numbers. That's even even during their run of 3 straight Final Fours, their attendance was below, I think, what it was when I was there. You know, so I just think we're in an era now where in major cities like Los Angeles or New York, it's going to be a challenge to sell out every night. You know, I think in smaller college towns, my time in broadcasting the Big Ten, you know, when a team was rolling, you knew the Kohl Center would be packed. Bloomington, you know, Indiana, Hoosier fans would turn out at the Izzone up in Lansing, East Lansing. But I think in New York, LA, Boston, you know, it's going to be tough to pack the house every night. But I think if we're playing a good brand of basketball, and if we were 8-0 right now, you know, I think more of our fans would turn out. But we're 6-2, you know, so it's, you know, some of it is dependent upon the winning, some is dependent on, you know, the time of the year. I also think fans by late January, early February across the board turn their attention to college basketball. You know, and I think this time of the year you've got a little NBA, you've got college football. You know, even when I was at ESPN as a broadcaster, we knew that our numbers would spike in terms of ratings. Once we got into late January and February, there seemed to be a focus in terms of you know, viewers that moved to college basketball. College basketball kind of moved to the forefront. February and March, it was a whole different level. You know, November, December, it's tough. You know, you have Maui and the different events that are on TV that people have an interest in. But I think this game with Syracuse and St. John's will garner some interest. Tough being on it, going against the NFL on a Sunday. But I think it seems as though attendance is going to be pretty strong for this ball game.
At least in Syracuse's fan base, if they do draw more fans, does it ever feel like a road game sometimes? Or if you play at the Garden and there are opposing fans,
Sure.
does it feel like a
Yeah,
road game?
not a road game, but you're aware that, you know, there's you know, a big contingent of Syracuse fans that are going to show up in the Garden anytime they play, and then when St. John's is playing well, you know, we get a great turnout as well. When I go back that February of my first year, we really got a crack and went undefeated in the month of February in Big East play, and you know, there was a momentum like a snowball, you know, rolling down the hill with the blowout of Duke in late January, the blowout of Syracuse in February, then a close, hard-fought, dramatic kind of almost buzzer-beating game. Hardy had that dramatic shot late in the game against Pittsburgh. And then we came back to Carnesecca. This place was packed to the brim against South Florida, you know, for I think what was our 20th win, kind of clinched more than likely we were going to go to the NCAA tournament. And it was senior day too, so I think that was a whiteout or a blackout. Blackout, yeah. So, you know, that kind of goes back to my point. I really think, you know, by February the attention turned to St. John's. We, to that point, hadn't had a great season, but we caught fire, went undefeated in February, and the attendance numbers got higher. And until Kennedy's injury in the Big East tournament, we had great momentum, you know. So I think it's a combination of factors that kind of go into attendance and the dynamic in the Garden. But Syracuse will always turn out, you know, a great number of fans, and if we're playing well, then we'll have our fair share of fans, and it should be, you know, an environment that's got great energy on Sunday. But, you know, I would anticipate the house will be buzzing.
Do you ever get into the whole, this is New York's team and New York's college team, 2 and 2?
Yeah, no, I really, you know, it's, you know, St. John's in terms of tradition, you know, you go back, the history of this program is so strong in terms of 3 Hall of Fame coaches there with, you know, Lapchick and McGuire and Louis and the great, you know, teams going back to the 30s and 40s and 50s, you know, all the way through. So, you know, I think, you know, Syracuse has a great program with strong tradition and heritage, and I think St. John's has a program that's, you know, top 10 in the history of basketball. If you look at the numbers, we've struggled the last, you know, 12 to 15 years, you know, maybe 2 tournaments in the last 15 years. So the reality is Syracuse has been going to the tournament on a consistent basis during these last couple decades of going to the Final Four, won a national championship, and in our last couple decades we've struggled. And so that's why, you know, they've got great momentum as a program, and we're trying to get there so we can be an NCAA tournament caliber team on an annual basis. And if you do that, then you have the chance to have those breakthroughs and make some deep runs in the tournament, give yourself a chance to get to a Final Four, win a national title. But it's a process, you know, we're in it's building blocks. You know, it's incremental progress, just like in a season, but there's also that for the build of a program, and that's what we're in the process of doing. But I don't get caught up in, you know, to me, our school's in New York. I mean, you know, so we're in New York City. So naturally, what's inherent in that is we are New York's team, because this is our zip code, our neighborhood, it's our home court. But I don't have any problem with Syracuse fans that think that they're New York's team in some way. You know, even though they don't have a campus, they don't have a home court here. You know, we actually do. You know.
Anything else for Coach? Zach?
Will you use Dom on fair a good amount?
Pardon me?
Will you use Dom?
Yeah, I think Dom will, you know, I think we'll rotate fresh bodies, you know, on the court. And we want to, you know, I think we'll continue to have, you know, 10, 11 guys who will play double-digit minutes so we can sustain the level of pressure and create a pace or tempo that's a favorable one for St. John's. So, you know, I think we'll give, you know, fair different looks.
What do you like about what Dom does defensively?
I think he's just one of those unique players that has the ability to harass or disrupt, discombobulate opponents with his foot speed, his length, his physicality, his ability to anticipate, and just the tenacity that he brings to the court. We call him our Batman, because he's saved the day. He's saved Gotham City so many times. If we put a cape on him, he would be our Batman. So, yeah, he's you know, been our most productive player over the last 3+ years. If you're just I'm talking about the mathematics, the metrics, not anyone's opinion or their view on things, just from a straight mathematical, statistical points, assists, blocks, rebounds, steals per minute, per possession. He's off the charts, you know, even as good as Dwight Hardy was and DJ Kennedy, and you know, we've had some Reese Harkless and some really gifted basketball players, but Dom's just a cut above everybody when it comes to just production, you know.
What does he have to work on yet?
I think he's still, you know, refinement of ball handling, and yet, you know, he almost had triple-double, like 11 assists with no turnovers. But I think he still wants to, you know, work on his left hand in terms of dribbling. I think, you know, the consistency of his outside shot, you know, just in terms of his shooting form, getting more. I'd like to see him get more rotation, more, you know, have the ball coming off the middle 3 fingers on a more consistent basis. Occasionally he'll throw a knuckleball or a change or a curveball up there, but when he gets under the ball and gets the ball released off his middle 3 fingers, he gets great lift, and the numbers bear out. Even though he doesn't take a lot of threes, he's selective, and as a result shoots a higher percentage than most of the kids on the team, both from the field and from the 3. So he's one of the more unique. That's one of the great. This team has a lot of unique personalities. They're unique personalities, unique talents, unique people, and as a group, it makes it a joy to coach them. As a result, you know. But Dom is another just interesting, kind of unorthodox in many respects, basketball player. But again, I wouldn't trade him for anybody, and I think his future here and beyond is really bright. I think we've known that all along. I think maybe you know, a more casual observer or people at the next level are beginning to take notice that maybe didn't the first 2 years. That just happens sometimes with the growth and maturation, or a certain game or a couple games where someone gets spotlighted and suddenly realize, like, wow, this guy's special. And that's definitely Don Pointer.
You said, I mean, the way he knows your team's X factor is, you said it many times, when he plays well, you guys.
Yep. There's no doubt. Yeah, if you go back the last 3 years, he's been the catalyst. He's spearheaded every big rally, every big win, and usually kind of puts the exclamation point on a victory, or is the one that puts the nail in the coffin on a team with a big punch dunk, an offensive rebound, a tip dunk, or the big steal, or the big assist, or the big lob dunk, in transition, or drops a dime to somebody, or just shuts someone down. I've got to go back to his freshman year, the first game I coached here, when I returned for those 4 games coming off of the cancer. And we were down 17 to Lehigh. Was it B.J.
C.J. McCollum.
C.J.
McCollum.
McCollum, yeah. And he was torching us. We fall down 17. I just said, Dom, just shut his water off. Don't let him catch the ball. Just shut him down. He went out and basically shut him down for the half. And we win the game, come 17 down to win. They end up beating Duke on the Sweet 16. We'll call them that 30-12 against Duke to go to the Sweet 16. And Dom just flat out came in like a plumber, just shut the water down completely. So that was as a freshman. You look at his development, his evolution since then. He's a high level processor as well. We have a lot of very bright kids on this team. They're very thoughtful, bright kids. They learn quickly, and that's a real plus, and why I think a couple months from now we could become a dangerous team. Because when you have thoughtful kids, and they're bright, and they learn, and they're capable students of the game, pupils, then you have to kind of factor that in terms of the upside. Sometimes you have a team that pretty much who they are. They come in November and they're the same team in March, because there isn't that upside, there isn't that insatiable appetite to get better, that natural curiosity to be a student or a pupil of the game. This group really wants to learn, whether it's a Max Hooper, or it's a Chris Obekba, or a Don Pointer, or a Phil Green. They like to study film, they listen intently in practices, they pick things up from timeout to timeout, from first half to second half, and from game to game. And so that's one of the reasons why we're enthused about the potential of this group, and yet we know we're a work in progress. We're not playing good basketball yet. We'd like to be 8-0 or 6-2, but I still believe give us 6 to 8 weeks. If we gel and we don't have any injuries, I think we could be a handful to play for teams, even though we're picked in the lower half of the league. By most of the pundits or experts.
What's your favorite nickname for Dom? Batman, Plumber, Costco?
WD-40?
WD-40.
Well, WD-40 that's more of an older school reference. This generation wouldn't know it as much, but WD-40 was in our household similar to Neosporin. It was used for everything. My mom said, "What are you doing?" My dad put Neosporin up our nose. He thought it prevented colds. She'd be like, you don't put Neosporin up their nose. But WD-40 was similar that way in terms of oiling joints and bike chains down in the garage. Spray it everywhere. Windex, wash windows with it. But Dom is our WD-40 or Costco, kind of jack of all trades. A renaissance man of basketball. Very well rounded.
Thank you, Coach.
All right, you guys.